So I was just going to do a quick introduction. I'm going to do it in Welsh first and then in English, but I am still a Welsh learner, so please be forgiving if my Welsh isn't perfect. Croeso pawb i'r sesiwn codi ymwybyddiaeth hon. Rhan o gyffres am gasgliad o gyfflyrau sy'n aml yn cyddigwydd mewn unigolion neu o fewn teuluoedd. Please defnyddiwch y bwlch sgwrsio I bostio unrhyw gwestiynau y hoffech gael atebion iddynt yn ystod y sesiwn holi ac ateb ar y diwedd. Hefyd, please cadwch eich camerau a'ch microfonau I ffwrdd drwy gydol y sesiwn I helpu popeth I redeg yn esmwyth. A dyn ni'n recordio o'r sesiwn hwn. Felly, credu. Dwi'n gweithio I credu. Mae credu yn gweithio gyda gyfalwyr di-dal ar draws Ceredigion a Phowys, yn ogystal y gyfalwyr ifanc yn Wrecsam, Conwy a Dinbych. Yn aml, dyn ni'n clywed gan rieni y gyfalwyr cyn lleied o ddeall sydd o'r cyfflyrau hyn a effaith ceir ar y teulu. Mae'n nhw am wybod sut mae cefnogi'r aelodau hynny a'i hunain, ac mae'n bwysig iddyn nhw teimlo'n bod y gweithwyr proffesiynol yn eu bywydau, yn eu clywed a'i deall. Dyn ni hefyd yn clywed gan y sawl sy'n gweithio ym myd iechyd ac addysg am eu angen nhw I ddeall a medru cefnogi unigolion a'i teuluoedd. Felly, gyda chefnogaeth ariannol gan y loteri ynghyd â'n prosiect ar gyfforddesiant wedi bwrw gan pobl, dyn ni'n hapus iawn I croesawu Jane Green MBE o SEDSConnective sydd wedi dod I gyflwyno sesiwn hon, gyda throsolwg a Neurowahaniaeth a Hypersymudedd, sut mae nhw'n cysylltu a beth ydy'r ffordd orau a gefnogi pobl ar cyflyrau hyn. Okay, so welcome everyone to this awareness raising session, part of a series about a collection of conditions that often co-occur in individuals or within families. Please use the chat box to post any questions you'd like answered during the Q&A at the end. Please keep your cameras and microphones turned off throughout the session to help everything run smoothly. We are recording the session. Credu works with unpaid carers across Ceredigion and Powys, as well as young carers from Wrexham, Conwy and Denbighshire. We often hear from parents and carers how little understanding there is of these conditions and the impact they have in a family. The parents and carers wanted to know how to support their family members and themselves, and it's important for them to feel that the professional workers in their lives hear and understand them too. We also hear from professionals who work in health and education about their own desire to understand these conditions and how best to support these individuals and their families. So, with financial support from the lottery and our own people-powered wellbeing project, we're very happy to welcome Jane Green, MBE from the SEDSConnective, to present us an overview of neurodivergence and hypermobility, how they connect, and what is the best way to support people with these conditions. Thank you. Jane.
Hello, thank you for inviting me. I'm going to share my screen. Bear with me while it probably goes wrong after even 5 years. Okay. Ta-da. Okay.
Perfect.
Right. Thank you. Although the first one is the same anyway. I'm not even going to try and pronounce this, but this is the Body, Brains and Burnout, Neurodivergence and Hypermobility. I was recently in Wales and it was wonderful to be live as well. But this is the online version, and those are my qualifications, which can look rather grand, but I want to say I'm a parent carer, and that will come out later on. I am an educationalist, former assistant head teacher, and I was lead for neurodivergence, quite wide, including England, Wales, and Scotland at one point. So, you know, what is the connection? It's really utterly bizarre, isn't it? Something like this can have a connection to other. And in a way, autism was often associated with a narrow, really, really typical perception years ago. So it would focus on boys or those with really a lot of intellectual disability or learning disability. And so it was obvious, it was very significant, there were issues. I do feel that a lot of people were probably years and years ago put in, hospitals, maybe chained up. I hate to think of that myself. But our understanding has significantly grown, and it is about awareness and the not that we're masking, but the diagnosis and understanding of it has grown, and that's why we have more diagnosis. And so, as it's still growing, well, hopefully you'll see this, because I have never seen an autistic person or ADHD person or dyspraxic or dyslexic person come to school or go to work or go to an event without a body. And the body affects is interacting with the head, with the brain. So that's what we do. And that's why the diagnosis, which is a big conversation at the moment, is growing. We don't think it's over diagnosis. It's like the hub. There's been a complete barrier, and now we're just going up the hub, this sort of hill, and we're just up there. But at the moment, it looks like, oh, everybody wants a bit of that. I can't, you wouldn't want to. I mean, there are strengths which you're going to see, but I don't think people would actually well, not that I've ever met anyway, would try and get these different diagnoses for no reason. So it is co-occurring, and that's what we're going to look at and how it matters for you as a carer. So first of all, language matters. I think no, I'm not going to try that one. It's very important because a lot of people use neurodiversity, and that's about all brains in the world being varied and different, unless you're a robot or clone. And even then, it might be different because of environmental factors. But neurodivergence is about a brain that processes, learns, thinks, and behaves differently from the neuromajority. And that's quite important because in these neurodivergences, which you're going to see later, we think the connective tissue is slightly different. And it's all about, well, it's not all about, but at the moment, it's all about connective tissue. I did this question live, which I can't really do, but it was I'm going to pose it so you can think about it anyway. How does the expected lifespan of autistic people compare to the general population? And it is quite significant that basically we don't live longer than the general population. We don't actually live the same expected lifespan as the general population. We actually tend to die earlier. But more than that, the actual what we call disability and illness days in the year are significantly bigger and larger than the general population. So it's about that part. Whoops, let me just try and move on. So there we go. We do, and there are various rates. They said 16 times earlier, and now it's gone down to 9. But actually, with the link to ADHD and everything else, those risks we think there's a lot more. So shockingly, yes. And but there's very little data on chronic illness or disability. So, what is hypermobility? I tend to use hypermobility, or we as a charity SEDSConnective do, because EDS, which stands for Ehlers-Danlos or hypermobility spectrum disorder, is quite a mouthful, and not everybody gets a diagnosis, and there are so many different types. So we tend to use hypermobility, but it's a huge umbrella. And it's more than flexible joints. It's not just old people that need rollators and canes. It's often young people as well. It has serious effects, but very often invisible for children. So toileting, stomach pains, migraines, just fatigue in the morning, even young, and pain. But of course, you know, it has huge strengths as well. And that's what I want to get through. One of our members' children who's dancing, we have a lot of ex-dancers who've got injured. We have gymnasts, we have all sorts of people. We do have a lot of researchers, but they also seem to be, what are those, aerial acrobats as well. But you have Olympic swimmers, you can have musicians, all sorts of people. So it's quite wide, and that's because we do excel in either flexibility or range of movement. So the next slide will show it. So 400 BC, Hippocrates first mentioned this. He said the warriors are really useless at doing their bow and arrow, and had poor wound healing. And then I can never say this, and I'm still practicing 5 years later. Chernogorov was a Russian scientist who presented a 17-year-old young man who was had very, very significant. He could sublux his joints. That's a half dislocation in front of people, and had very, very stretchy skin. So he probably had a very rare type of EDS, which I'll go into in a minute. And then we have, you might have heard already, Dr. Ehlers and Dr. Danlos, and that's where EDS comes from. And so that was in 1901, and then Dr. Danlos in 1908. And one was a dermatologist and the other a doctor, and they meant, it's funny, I hope this isn't timed. They mentioned the differences, and they've produced a paper. So that's where EDS came from. If it is timed, I'll just have to keep going back. I might just check that if possible. So there are various types. There are 13 named types, and 12 of them are extremely rare. So you've got classical EDS at 1 in 20,000, vascular EDS, which is can be life limiting, but with care is okay, and that's 1 in 50,000. So that's quite significant too. But the main ones we're talking about today, there's so many. You can look on the EDS Society if you want to look at the actual criteria. But for EDS, we're looking at hypermobility, Ehlers-Danlos, and HSD. And the reason for that is there's no genetic test. So for those others, you can go and you have to be assessed, but you can check it with your genes, a gene marker. There's a definite marker. So for hypermobility, I'll call it HEADS, diagnosis, you do any diagnosis, you need the Baton score. And it's the ones on the right of the line, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. It's not good to get all 9, by the way. People think that, and you're probably fiddling. We think maybe the ones on the left might come in. So there's a new, the EDS Society are looking at the new diagnosis maybe for this next year in 26, 27. This is for adults. So for adults, you have to score 5 points, unless you're over 50. And then it's 4, because, basically we get stiffer generally. For children, I'll talk about children later. So there's so many acronyms for hypermobility. We did this graphic, and I was first diagnosed with EDS3. So, but it changes all the time, and some people have much older ones. You've still got a diagnosis, but it did change in 2017 to hypermobility EDS and HSD. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but that's where we are at the moment, and you can see why I use hypermobility. I did put the next slide out. I said, which condition are autistic people? And I'm saying autistic because that's where the data is mainly. I'm not limiting myself at all. But what condition are autistic people most at risk of? Is it cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, stroke, circulatory respiratory conditions, hypermobility, including gastrointestinal issues, or all of the above? And all of the above is the next slide I'm going to show. And you can't answer me, but it is G. And so that's why we have, and that's just a few of them. And we think probably there's a crossover even more so with autoimmune. That's what we see with our members as well, quite a wide variance. There was a very large global study that came out in August by the Norris Lab, who are a lovely research group in America. And they did this very large survey over the last few years. It's very good. It's not a research study, it's a global survey, but it sort of touched on nearly everything, including autoimmune. So I did these graphics, or we might still, they evolve. I know they're quite small, you can get the bigger ones from us. But it was about strengths and challenges because I've been doing icebergs for so long. I always like to change them. Usually they're visible, invisible. I think some are both strengths and challenges. I think we are vulnerable. I think there are a lot of expectations. But hyperfocus can be both good and not so good. So they're different things, but the one thing that's common is health in all these areas. And that's why neurodivergence, and that's why we formed a SEDSConnective to join them up. And that's so important. And I'll tell you a little bit more about us as well. So this is something that's still evolving as well. Now, I've already talked slightly on connective, but what is it? And I'm going to start with the house. If you start building a house with some builders and they've got the cement and some sand and water, it's on a timer, in a particular section, then it will be built in one way. Then you get the new builders on and they start using a different proportion. And so you'll get a wonky house. And then they might use something else, and you'll get an even wonky house because they might have used more sand than water. So yeah, that and then you add in water and electrics and the temperature differences and people, and after a few years you're going to get an explosion. And that's a bit like what happens in our body. So collagen is found, I mean, connective tissues, the main protein is collagen. You've heard of collagen. I'm just looking at the slides in case they move on. And it's found throughout our body. It surrounds our muscles, our nerves, obviously joints and cartilage, but actually the organs as well, and something called the autonomic nervous system. And that helps us to digest food, rest or sleep, or if we're in danger, it gets the adrenaline going, so we're ready to fight. But and also it's in the brain and body. So the collagen, I call it, like, think of spaghetti but not breaking, or elastic, an elastic band. So most connective tissue is quite rigid. You can't move it like that, really. Ours just goes woo like that, like elastic. And it has some benefits apparently, but and that's why people become more flexible. I think possibly there's more to that in the brain, but we do think that well, if you've got this elasticity in the vascular system, in the lymphatic system, in all your systems, it's very hard to keep it stable. Yeah, so it's going to take a lot more energy to keep stable because we've got so much bendiness. And then that means we're using more energy, we get more tired, we get chronically fatigued. And then we have more inflammation because it's actually affecting us so much more. And then we have all these other injuries because if you've got weaker joints, you're probably likely to sprain or tear, more likely when you're young, particularly, and definitely sublux, which is like a half dislocation of a joint. Sometimes you can do full dislocations. It can affect our head, so we can get migraine, we can get brain fog, executive functioning, which is like you just don't know where you are, you've lost the plot. It might happen today, and you know, you've got brain fog. You can't work out the next thing. It's just bizarre. And there is more to that as well. So it is very, very significant. But of course, it's not been known about. And that's been the issue with our tissues, really. So there are strengths, but there are also deficits. And I'm not immune to knowing that the people we care for, you know, might have learning disabilities as well, or significant issues. I am a carer, and I'll talk about that. So we did this brains graphic because I wanted to do the strengths. All my life I've been called well, not so good things, criticized, you know, and sometimes you just want some good things. What are the good things about this? And there are real strengths we have. And the reason we have the brain is because, and the arrows is because it does go to a body. As I said, generally, it doesn't go elsewhere. But there are issues. There are lots of issues with hormones and also generational, because hypermobility is heritable, as is neurodivergence, we believe. And that means we're often carers because, or even sandwich carers as I am, because others are ill as well. And that makes it so much more difficult. So you might have seen this already, I don't know, but this is, we call it symptomatic hypermobility because so many don't get a diagnosis. The reason we did the conference at the Royal Society of Medicine this year on post-COVID-19 neurodivergence and hypermobility was because rheumatologists are not going to accept referrals for diagnosis, and that's how we used to get a diagnosis. So that's why we did it, and we do believe as a community charity we should have a voice, and we're making significant progress, and that's great. But we have a lot of barriers. So we've got the barriers against getting a diagnosis for neurodivergence, autism, ADHD, or just long delays. I don't know how long in Wales, but I imagine it's about the same. These are very common issues with us. I would like you to look at, well, we'll look at anxiety later, actually. But just to note that the skin can be thin, translucent, so you can almost see all the veins and capillaries underneath moving, very often bruised. And this is significant, particularly for older people, if you're looking after them for safeguarding, but also young children, particularly if the parents don't know they have this, the teachers don't know, and the doctors don't know. But you can also get very thick, silky skin. And the bruises, if you injure yourself, might not appear for about 5 days. And that's also dangerous, actually, because you think maybe you're not injured, or people say, oh, you're always getting injured or ill. And well, you haven't got a bruise, so you're not injured. And that happens a lot. And you tend to mask your injuries or pain. And quite key there, if you look at the bottom, is atopic dermatitis, hay fever, and rhinitis. And I think that's very significant. I've been in committees on that with NICE, and quite a few years ago. And also food issues are key there too. Just checking the time. You might have heard already about the senses. When I started training, we learnt about, well, we always knew about the 5 senses, of course, you know, eating, smell, hearing, and so on. And then later on, when I trained very late, 2005-06, I learned about vestibular, which is, think of the astronauts coming back to Earth, they have a big problem with vestibular and interoception, actually, and proprioception, poor things, knowing if they're upright or not, or horizontal. And that's knowing if you're that way. Proprioception is about like the cat's whiskers, you're sensing where objects are or where your limbs are in space. We have issues with that. And interoception is about not knowing if we're tired, if we're hungry, if we need the toilet, if we are in pain. And so that's just a bit more tricky for us. And then we've got to get over the masking of pain as well. So interoception, I've been presenting for quite a while, and I was in studies. And they've been written up, and you can read them too, or they've been in articles. So it's very key, and probably why you often find if you're caring for someone, they're fine, and then next minute they're absolutely in pain. Where did it come from? It seems to come out of the blue, or they're in school, or something like that. But it might be because of interoception. It doesn't work straight away. It takes time to process, and then suddenly it seems to come out the blue. And they might be very ill by then, or very injured, or it might be a paper cut, because that can seem, really quite hard. This paper, one of our dietitians was in this, and 90% of people diagnosed with HEDS or HSD have these very common food issues, and that is so, so key. There's so many here, but often they're misconstrued or misinterpreted as other things, particularly children, I think. And we have to be aware that it's a physical pain. When I couldn't eat really for a long time, quite a few months, and I was a middle-aged woman. And I used to have most of these. I'd be vomiting. I'd have stomach cramps, just awful stomach cramps, bloating, but also just pain and nausea and vomiting. And I couldn't, and coughing, and you get pseudo asthma, and I couldn't keep anything down. And I wanted to eat. I really wanted to because I was losing a lot of weight. When you go for a test, it comes back negative. That's the issue. And so again, you feel like you're masking it all. And why can't you eat? Sometimes people can't swallow well. Food gets stuck in the throat. We think it's a connective tissue issue. When my eldest was very young, this happened a lot, and I think they got a diagnosis of oral dyspraxia, but we now know it's dysphagia and probably hypermobility. Reflux happens a lot. We know, if you're pregnant, you probably get reflux, but for us, the connective tissue with the stomach and the esophagus is a sphincter, like a close. We've got diagrams of this, bottom and top of the stomach, and they're weaker, they're stretchier, so they don't close properly, and the acid from the stomach goes back up or back down, and all sorts like that. But I think the fear of food is really key, because if you get pain and everything like that, but you are neurodivergent, you're less likely to say, well, be able to express it or articulate it. So you just don't want the food. You push the food away. So you can get a fear of food because it's hurting. That's what I had, which was really bizarre. Yeah. So that's quite significant. And allergies. There's a study that came out that the direct food allergies there on the right, tree nuts, shellfish, and so on, are significant. So for 3-year-old children and 9-year-old children with ADHD, so 3-year-old children who are autistic, 9-year-old children with ADHD are more likely to have direct food allergies. But there isn't so much data for the non-IgE, what we call non-direct food. But we know we have these issues, and it's very, very common. And we think it's because we overreact, the body overreacts to threats to the body. It's easy as threats to the body when they're actually not. And this includes eczema, rhinitis, hay fever, all these other things. And it could be animal pollen as well, or mold. So you can get all these different wheals and rashes. And the next one, I should warn you, has a picture of a nasty flare. It is myself, so I've got permission for that. And I've suffered from this for ages, and I can be the whole body. We don't need to be just one thing to have this. This is what we are. Not everybody has this at all. I have had different things where my skin's been on fire, like I could fry an egg, it's so hot as well. Sometimes all my skin can blow up with fluid. It's a bit different, called angioedema as well. But these are mast cells and they fight allergies, or if you're injured or you have you're in a fight, anything like that, these cells will move around the body and go to the injury or illness and try and save you. So they're good things to have. Mast cells are very good, but they for us they're just a bit overreactive. They're just a bit excited, and what they do is release too much histamine alongside other chemicals. And sometimes if you get a lot of injuries, illness, and we're susceptible to this because of our connective tissue, and all the stress and caring we have, it can build up into this sort of, like I said, that house exploding. We call it a cytokine storm. So while these mast cells are very important to us in injury and illness and making sure we survive, that's their job, they just become inappropriately triggered. And they can be to food or it can be to the environment. We also think it can be to certain types of stress. And that's where the brain body comes in. You can't have one without the other, probably. I want to talk about pain. You've heard of the VAS scale. I don't think it works for a lot of us, and it might not work for the people you care for. And the reason is I use this, the one in the middle, the one in the middle quite often because that was my leg. It was like a firework on fire with barbed wire on, and I wanted it cut off. So it was quite difficult. Then we just learned to mask pain because we're not believed. We have pain probably. Someone was telling me yesterday their daughter has pain all the time. They're never less than a 4. Other people just say, oh, I'm always a 4. I'm always okay. So it differs a lot. But when you actually go to hospital or you're trying to get a marker for someone you care for, it's very difficult for them to do it. And that's what I'd like to point out. And sometimes we do whole maps, body mapping, just draw the whole thing. And if you're also autistic or ADHD, it might be the last thing you had, but really significant is this other pain, which might be appendicitis, but you've ignored it for so long. And also you've just not been believed before. So why do you want to be called a hypochondriac before again? This word is called dysautonomia. It took me a few years to get around that word. It's not just this is just showing one type, but there are other types. And so this is one where you go from sitting to standing. The blood, because we've got weaker vascular system and a weaker lymphatic system and the collagen, which is stretchier, because of that change in posture, the blood goes down to our feet quite often. It's not all about blood, but it often means that the head isn't getting oxygen. But also, it means that the heart starts pounding much faster. So the heart rate goes up a lot. And that's really unpleasant. And even if you've been absolutely looking forward to the day, you've got lots on, maybe it's someone's birthday or whatever it is, you've won the lottery, you can get up and suddenly you're feeling really, really anxious. But it wasn't a mental anxiety. It actually is a physical anxiety. Some people faint. You can get this after eating a big meal. Oh, there we go. You can get this after eating a big meal because what happens is that the blood all goes to the stomach to digest the food. And because of our weaker collagen, again, that happens. It can happen in temperature differences if you're having a shower or bath. On poor people, some members do these things called holidays. I don't know what they are anymore, but they go on holiday to a hot country and they're incredibly ill. and it's a real shame. And they've just been ill the whole time because the temperature has really affected them. It's not everybody. And this is something, some people get postural tachycardia, but not everybody has it. I don't have it. I have orthostatic intolerance. But these things we made a burnout exhaustion POTS bucket. I've always been asked for buckets as many as the icebergs. And so these are very often the common things we have. So by the end of the day, your carer, the child, or you might have this, and you're just exhausted, basically. It's exhausting to do this. You might have it at the beginning of the day. This is some research. You can look at it, and so if you want to know about it, neurodivergent people are 2 times more likely to have hypermobility, i.e., the Baton scale, they've passed that, and therefore have more pain and fatigue and dizziness than the general population. And many psychiatric problems, including depression and anxiety, start before the age of 25. We know that from the World Health Organization data. So there's a lot of work going on that, particularly with us. So it might be, again, the autonomic nervous system being triggered, affects the amygdala and other sites in the brain, causes this, or it might be something else. But in the graphic, hypermobility is the mechanism between all of those. Can you see between neurodivergence, musculoskeletal pain, or orthostatic intolerance, which is a dysautonomia? So that's quite significant. There's some bigger ones of it. I'm just going to whiz on a little bit. This is a child standing, sitting, very, very common. And often it happens to adults. We stand like that. So just to know that, how you can see that quite often. This is a child one of symptomatic hypermobility. They were very, very unlikely to get a diagnosis of EDS, unless they're very rare and it's in the family. So it's very rare. And they have to do the Baton scale, but they have to score 6 points. You cannot get a diagnosis before the age of 5. And they won't get a diagnosis of HEDS or HSD before 18 because of bone maturity. So that came out. This is just another one of what's blood flow, but we've seen that already. So I think we can move on. I'm an educationalist. These are some of the quotes we've had why the issues are not believed. And that's what I do. I had a peer-reviewed paper out, a co-author with 2 pain advisors on this, the first one ever. I also did the education toolkit and lots of other articles because I felt it was so important. We are included and believed. We still got a way to go at the moment, but hopefully we will. And so my work has been on emotional-based school avoidance, because guess what? Most of the issues that they talk about in the EBSA documents are feeling sick, stomachache, headaches, poor digestion, bowel bladder issues, tiredness, muscle rigidity, which we actually get more stiff than flexible, weirdly, because the muscles get overreactive. Poor sleep is very key, dysautonomia, and racing heart. Well, the racing heart is probably that anxiety. And also we get more cross because we're not believed. This is our paper we did, which you can look at there. So I don't know if you're interested in education, but I've got a lot on there and what we can do about it. Long COVID is an issue, a significant one. I just saw a new paper out yesterday which said 4 times as much. So our patron is Dr. Eckel. She's the leading researcher in the world, and I connected to her quite a few years ago, and we present together. So it shows that if you have connective tissue, you're 30% less likely to recover from long COVID. The paper last night said 4 times more likely to have hypermobility. That's interesting. This is just about neurodivergence again. There's a nice graphic there on different issues. You might be looking after people and they're crying out because it's horrible environment, and might be why. So you might want to look at that one again, and it can raise our cortisol. as well. So it is much more than joints. Pain is one thing that really affects everybody, not just us, of course, and it affects all systems. And it's really interesting when I go to conferences, pain is the one thing that affects all systems. I would say hypermobility nearly. But it does cause a lot of fatigue and inflammation. And so people do different things, to be honest with it. Pacing is good. Some people like sleep hygiene. If you've got orthostatic intolerance, there's lots you do with compression, strengthening the muscles. And that's key because we've got such weak collagen, the only thing holding us up more is our muscles. Yeah. But you have to do it really carefully, really carefully. Don't try and stretch too far. It might be easy, or you're the one you care for, it might be easy, but don't too much. That's not what you need to do. And I think, I say this as someone with hypermobility. When you go and see a doctor, you're taking a trolley full. But I think when you're carer or double carer, you're taking even 2 trolleys. It's really significant. They say bring all your notes with you. There's so much to bring. And so when you're caring, it's almost like you're blowing the boundaries between you and the ones you care for. I do angles of caring. I've been a trustee for carers charities. For me, I've been on the largest board for social care at one time as a trustee. And I thought I knew about caring because of this, and I don't. All the issues and barriers I've had in the last 2 years, I just don't stop. And even this week, I have had a lot of issues. I was in a big conference, and there's just significant issues. And I think it's about weaving that conversation of care, health, and everything else into it. Carers with these issues and neurodivergence, which aren't believed, we have really big burdens. And so we hope to do a lot more on that, and how the bias has built up over the years. So I just want to talk about me, as if I haven't, but that was me as a child. I always wanted to do ballet. I wasn't allowed, but I did have a tutu at age 8. If you look on the bottom left, I've got very bendy knees, and I'm hyperextending my knees backwards, as my dear father was as well. We stood very much alike. I became a night owl. I travelled a lot. I left school early at 16, considered dim and a hypochondriac, and missed a lot of school for that. So I started travelling. I did a lot of jobs, including a goat herder. After a while, I came back. I got married. I had children. My youngest is in the pram. He had severe eczema. I had to wrap him up day and night. It was a full-time role. Plus, my eldest was born with birth trauma and has diagnosed very early with ADHD, autism, dyspraxia, later dyslexia, and a learning disability. So I long-term carer for that. But of course, we get injured and we get ill. And how do you do that? Well, my poor youngest was almost our carer at times as well, or particularly in later years when I was trying to study. I did get a degree or 2, and but often, and I was working and I had a national job, but I'd just come back and collapse, and my youngest had to look after me. So it's been significant. And as I said, I had to retire in 2015 with no diagnosis, no support, because there wasn't any. And so that was difficult. And I did recover. I still have flares, of course. And I've done lots of articles. There's my patron, we're looking at brains. And I'm very lucky to have an MBE for neurodivergence and hypermobility. And I hope that helps a lot going forward with government. So these are some of the papers we have, which you can look at later on. They're QR codes, or there's references further on. And this is who we are. We are a community charity. We're voluntary. We know exactly where the money goes. And we're very, very diverse, I have to say. And I like that. We have two patrons now. We have a neurogastroenterologist called Dr. Spiritos. We'll be doing a webinar soon. And we have a lot of volunteers, which is lovely. We have about 46. We have advisors who are also, we user-led, and we have trustees. And so, and we have wonderful, support. So this is what we do. We started very small, no money, no connections, and our reputation is kind of global, but we are registered across the UK, including Scotland. And I sit on both boards and been in the European Neurological Federation as well. So there's a lot going to happen. And that's why, you're welcome to join us as well. I am a carer. I'm also a sandwich carer. And that means I look after my mother remotely, though. Again, there have been issues this week, so I do understand the issues of caring and how much stress that can place on us, but also our bodies, and it comes out in our body. I'm not saying that all stress comes out in our bodies actually creates it as well. So it's a two-way process. So do not think it's only the brain creating it and the environment. It's definitely the body. We can get our connective tissue stretchier. So we've got to connect the whole thing. We've got to connect the community, the education, the health, and social care. And on that note, because I know I have to finish and I'm only 2 minutes late, I'm going to stop and see if there are any questions. So I'll stop sharing my screen.
So there was one question submitted via email that was put in the chat earlier. I don't know if you can see that, or do you want me to read it out?
About hormone changes, yeah. It's very significant. So we know that girls are more affected in secondary age. That's often where things go wrong. And that's probably puberty, because girls are more affected than males. So the female hormones actually make our connective tissues even weaker than they were before. And then you've got the menstrual cycle, and we know the week before that happens, the luteal stage, we are more likely to have dyspraxic, if you like, visibility. We proprioception issues. So you bump into things, you have more pain, more migraines, and and you can get lots of some people get a lot of pain with this, and it can lead to, and might be endometriosis, and probably not at that age, they won't get a diagnosis. You can get endometriosis, you can get all sorts of things. We also know conception has an issue, pregnancy, after post birth, and then of course perimenopause and menopause, which was the question. So different levels of hormones are changing then, like estrogen. If you're taking contraception like progesterone, mini pills, that will also have an effect in a bad way. So luckily, there's a lot more research going on now. But that house that exploded, that's generally what happens to 50-year-olds. That's what happened to me. And so we do need support there. And there are things you can do, i.e., I'm not medical, as I say again, but there are things you can do to help yourself there. And also you need to check your bloods. It was very hard back in my day to get any blood tests for hormones or anything like that. I think it's much easier now, because some celebrities have gone on TV and talked about it and things. And there's a lot more, of course, on Instagram or whatever. But yeah, it's definitely affects you. But interestingly, for POTS, it might actually improve it sometimes, weirdly. So we find that between 13 and 15, POTS really comes to the fore. You can get it when you're younger, of course. And usually by 50s, it actually gets a bit better if you've got that support for POTS. So that's good. And there is some evidence to show when you're pregnant, POTS can improve. or it can get worse. In my case, I didn't have POTS, but the fainting got worse, and the hyperglycemia, which is a sort of, it's like a lack of blood sugar. You just need to eat a lot of crisps and caffeine and sugar, which sounds really bizarre, but that's what we have to do if you haven't got your energy electrolytes with you, which we often have. Is that okay?
Yeah, I can't see any other questions. So yeah, and yeah, if there are no more questions, I guess we wrap up there. If that's all right with you.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me again, and
Not at all.
might be seeing you again actually.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
thank
I
you,
haven't told you.
thank you, thank you so much for. Oh, we have a question coming in. Just while it's writing, I'll just say, yeah, thank you so much for doing this again. We really appreciate your time and for helping us fix the tech issues we had last time we tried to do this. It's been brilliant, and I'm sure I speak for everyone who's attended when we say thank you so much. I believe we're talking about trying to set up support groups
Yeah,
locally.
definitely.
So watch this space for that. I'm sure both us and SEDSConnective will publicize that once we know what's happening with that. Okay, the question is in the chat.
It depends what you mean by brain defect. I don't know. I'm not a neurologist. I actually think it's probably because it's bendier. I think we're much more creative. Nearly everyone I've met, because I'm multiple neurodivergent, I've got a few diagnoses now, I'll probably collect more. But I think it makes us much more creative because maybe it's bendier and it can get to places without having to trudge along. That's how I think of it. But I think also there's definitely we can be more prone to depression. That's in the evidence in 2016 by Serdeloff, and also hyper anxiety, not anxiety, well, anxiety as well, mental and emotional, but also physiological, which isn't understood, but also sort of hypermania for some people. So I suppose that's what you mean. Oh, I really don't know. Possibly, I'm not a neurologist. You'll have to ask that. That's a bit out of my scope as a educationalist on that. I'm not sure. I can find out actually, of course. Maybe with our advisors. It would be interesting to know. I don't think it's necessarily the case. Of course, a lot of autistic people have epilepsy. So, that's one of the most common co-occurring issues. So, yeah, it would be interesting to know. I don't know, though, is the answer to that. And of course, a lot of people have different medications, so that will affect different things as well. So I imagine it's quite complex. Epilepsy, yeah. Don't know. I mean, I know children. I've worked in epilepsy hospital schools and autistic schools, so many syndromes that it's very complicated. And of course, you can have young children with epilepsy. So I don't know, I have to say. I'm going to be honest.
I have another question. I'm not sure if you can see it. I think it was sent just to me. Is there any current or recent research around autism, the autoimmune system, and hypermobility you would recommend reading?
Autism, autoimmune conditions, and what was the next last
Hypermobility.
one? Hyper.
Hypermobility.
Um, it depends what any articles was it? Sorry, I can't see it. Did you say articles?
Um, yeah, current or recent research.
Mm. There's a lot. We're just updating our website. We've got 3 volunteers doing a little project on it at the moment. So that global survey I mentioned was a survey on it, but there are lots of papers. The thing is, everybody asks me, where's the one paper that connects it all? And there isn't one. You can't get neurodivergence and hypermobility and and autoimmune altogether. In fact, usually it's just autism, maybe ADHD, and one other thing, because that's how research works. So it all builds up. It would be neurodivergence is wider than autism, ADHD, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, Tourette's. It's actually any brain. You can have acquired brain injury. You can get it from other. If you've taken a lot of weird substances, you can get a different sort of brain. So it would be very hard to do that. So you have to really screen it down. Autoimmune, there's been very, very little research. We think it's growing. It's more complicated than the connective tissue only and the collagen. It's to do probably with the extracellular matrix and energy, water, and things like that. Plus the chemicals. I don't think it's just one gene myself. I don't think so. And also for us, I as I said, I went on Radio 4 and I said, for us, we don't want a cure for being neurodivergent. We think it's a strength in often ways. We know there are challenges, of course, but we do want support and belief for our body, and we want to be heard as a community charity that we want that belief for hypermobility, even if we don't get a diagnosis. As I said, the rheumatologist probably, we're going to get less diagnosis. What happens then if you have less diagnosis? It's called data. You have less data. And if you have less data, you have less health literacy, you have less health equity, and therefore less funding by the policymakers. So we need this data. We don't want to go back to just having only, I've got fibromyalgia diagnosis, I've got chronic fatigue syndrome diagnosis, and I've got an IBS diagnosis. And I think I've got one other, but I've forgotten what it was. But that didn't make sense to me till I looked into, well, I knew about AIDS back in 2009, but because I'm quite literal, until I had it, it felt more real. That's why a diagnosis is so important. And B, why we don't want to go back to doctors who can do an 8-minute consultation and do fibromyalgia, because that's just hiding what we are. So yeah, it's I don't know if I've answered that question or not, or too far, but I think watch this space. We do need we're involved in research, and there's a lot more coming, but we need to get more data. So I already said to Pete and Melissa, I would send on something when it comes out soon, so you can all get involved if you're in the right age bracket. How do you get a diagnosis for what? Sorry, on that one. How does one go about? Is that neurodivergence or hypermobility? If it's neurodivergence, well, as I said, it's very difficult at the moment. You can go privately, so you can pay. There might be a few doctors who can do it. It takes a good 45 minutes really to do an assessment, so it's quite tricky. What you need to do is be careful. I mean, don't go in and say you think you've got AIDS, can I have a diagnosis? You have to give a family history. You have to list your symptoms, say what's the most significant, why is it affecting you, and if really important, if it's hypermobility AIDS, and it might be HSD, don't get too hung up if it's HSD, because for me, it's hypermobility and you still need all the support you can. You might get a diagnosis if the doctor's really up to date with it and does a really thorough examination, but they need to do it thoroughly for 45 minutes. They should not be doing it so quick. It might be that occupational therapists will be doing it, or physiotherapists in musculoskeletal hubs. We're looking at that at the moment. It might be that you get a diagnosis, by the way, and you're still discharged, just to let you know, because that's a horrible feeling. And that's why I wanted to build this, because that's what happened to me. And you're just left. I bought a book for someone because it's a horrible feeling. And the doctors didn't know about it. And of course, They don't for children or young people or adults. And I definitely, we have so many older members too who are just realizing their carers that they probably have these issues as well. But there's a lot of trauma built up because they've been so, called neurotic, hypochondriacs, and so on. And that's there's no other condition that has all these issues. I'm sorry to use the pun, issues. All these problems of disbelief, is it? So you can go. It depends where you're located to get EDS. Some do have really good people who can do it. Maybe in local hospitals, some have none. It really depends. I don't know about Aberystwyth. I don't know what it's like there. Always happy to help. But we've got GPs as advisors, and we are connecting them both. So what we do is connect them both. In fact, our patron Dr. Eccles has a brain body diagnosis centre in Sussex, where I'm from, and that's where I started it. It was just to be in the village, but she has a brain body clinic, and they do diagnosis, but not privately. So the best way is to ask on our group. We do have other Welsh members there, and see how it goes. I don't know if it's for a child or adult. I presume it's adult there. Not sure. But as I say, if it's a rare type, you'd probably know about adult. Oh, I've got to go. I've got another presentation to do. So sorry. Anyway, do write in if you want anything more. Sort of in demand at the moment. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Jane. Really appreciate your time.
Okay. Bye bye.